Every Zelda fan had their eyes set on one target, the next Zelda game, the one that was showcased at E3 2004, slated to be released in 2005 as the next big adventure for the GameCube, a fitting comeback after that god-awful cartoony game known as The Wind Waker, except it got delayed until 2006 to support the Wii's launch. The game was later revealed to be called The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. However, it wasn't even a whole half year after that massive reveal when Nintendo gave us yet another Zelda game to hold us over, but frankly, it was buried underneath bits of excitement for Twilight Princess. It was also buried underneath the launch of the Nintendo DS, the very same console that arguably ruined another potentially great Zelda game. Presented to Europe first, we were given The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, a prequel to the not-so-critically acclaimed Four Swords, and its better-known sequel, Four Swords Adventures. The focus on being a more traditional Zelda game that explains the creation of the Four Sword, and also establishing the world of Hyrule at one of its earliest stages. This game was directed by Hidemaro Fujibashi, who had previously directed all of the other Capcom Zelda games and moved on to directing Phantom Hourglass, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, as well as writing the story for Age of Calamity. To put it in perspective, he basically directed both of the best and worst Zelda games in history, which leaves us to question, which extremity does the Minish Cap fall into? Because not many people have played this game, I will throw in that rare spoiler alert, as this is an adventure that is worth experiencing yourself. At face value, the Minish Cap pushes very heavily on being independent from the rest of the franchise, but it also holds its merits for featuring numerous characters from previous games. It's a prequel to Four Swords, which is a prequel to Ocarina of Time, and there is technically a prequel to this game, known as Skyward Sword, effectively making this a sequel, though I don't think that's exactly how prequel and sequel terminology works. You're immediately introduced to the Minish, also known as the Picori. These tiny creatures roam around Hyrule, but it is said that only children are able to see them and must consume a special nut in order to understand their language. We also have a very familiar looking character in the mural, clad in a familiar green tunic and sporting no cap and long hair? Oh, and the sword he's wielding is not the Master Sword, but we'll get onto that soon. Fast forward to the actual game, where Link is told to wake up. It is quickly established that Link is childhood friends with Zelda, and he lives with his grandpa, who is named Smith, who is a blacksmith, sporting a bandana and a beard, and happens to be one of his few known relatives. This is one of the only times where we've seen a father figure to Link, although I'm getting that feeling that Smith is the most important out of all the relatives we've seen. Zelda invites Link to the annual Picori Festival, which celebrates the aforementioned Picori race and their influence in Hyrule's history. Blah blah blah, they do a bunch of festival stuff, some gameplay tutorials happen, and then the two head over to Hyrule Castle to watch the ending ceremony of a sword fight tournament. Presented as the prize is the opportunity to touch the ancient Picori Blade, a weapon once used by the hero of men to repel and banish evil. Coincidentally enough, it looks like the Master Sword, but it has a rounded hilt rather than wings. The winner of this tournament is a foreign man named Vaati, who has exceptional skills at sword combat and has won this tournament with ease. However, his intentions weren't simply to touch the blade. He desired an ancient power known as the Light Force, which he believed the sword was guarding. Upon seeing the blade and speaking out his true objective, the Hyrulean guards attacked him, only to be swept aside with ease as he blasted a powerful projectile at the sword, shattering its blade, and unlocking the chest that it sat on. Upon opening this chest, a huge plethora of monsters were released into Hyrule. A magical power emanated from Zelda, and she, alongside Link, confronted Vaati. However, that moment was short-lived, as Vaati sent an attack that knocked Link out and turned Zelda into stone. Moments after waking up and learning about what had transpired, Link is given a desperate request from the King of Hyrule to reforge the broken Picori Blade and save Zelda from her fate. He would have to travel through various ruins, into numerous environments, and even up into the heavens to reforge this blade. Early on through his adventures, he meets this bird-like hat figure named Eslo, who has a similar goal of going after Vaati. We learn that he understands the Minish language and is able to turn Link tiny. Due to his appearance as a hat, he decides to work with Link in his adventures, given he is unable to fight for himself or travel at fast speeds. From this point on, the story progresses and we start learning about the backstories of these characters, but I think I'll leave that up to you to discover. Roughly halfway through the game, you encounter various ruins left by the Wind Tribe. These ruins bear an uncanny resemblance to the Zonai architecture of Breath of the Wild, sporting these never-seen-before beasts and structures that were presumably inspired by the lost Mayan culture in South America. That's just the tip of the iceberg, though. You do get to meet people of the Wind Tribe in a later segment of the game. This segment involves Link and Ezlo traveling through the skies, before ultimately ending up where the Wind Tribe resides, in their humble abode. They still retain the same architecture and symbols, and it's only fair to say that they were the last inhabitants of the sky, contrary to common belief of Skyloft being the last. Another interesting aspect of this game's story is getting to meet various different Minish races. I mentioned earlier that Ezlo understands the Minish language. Let me rephrase that. Ezlo understands a dialect of the Minish language. You have the Forest Minish, the Town Minish, and the Mining Minish, all reflective of real-world lifestyles. The dialect plays a perfect parallel to common everyday languages that we have today. I could be speaking American English, and you wouldn't understand a word or two if you were speaking in UK English. One of the best things about the Minish Cap is that the gameplay feels very definitive. Like, we won't ever get any 2D Zelda game from this point forward. One of the newer features they added was rolling, obviously borrowed from 3D Zelda games, which thankfully saved a lot of time walking around the overworld. The combat itself feels very fluid and natural, and using every item feels as easy as you'd expect. While the game feels like a very traditional top-down 2D Zelda game, the main gimmick here is that you'll get to turn tiny. And no, I won't start making dumb references to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids like everyone else does when someone turns tiny. In this tiny form, you'll be able to traverse through certain areas that you normally wouldn't be able to in your regular size, including various settlements inhabited by the Picori. You'll also get to talk to various animals in this form. However, be warned, because some animals might end up being very hostile. Additionally, every small, regular-sized threat is now massive. Even a puddle of water that is normally ankle deep is like the Marianas Trench in your tiny form. A small, almost harmless Choo-Choo is now a huge, dangerous beast that your tiny self couldn't hurt without spending a whole boss fight worth of fighting. Another feature introduced in the Minish Cap are Tiger Scrolls, which are essentially the precursor to the hidden skills from Twilight Princess. As you progress further into the game, you'll be able to learn and master various techniques to help you in combat. While a number of these abilities are mandatory, the rest are all optional and are quite beneficial to you later throughout the game. Finally, we have the Kinstone pieces, which are broken pieces of a medallion that everyone seems to be carrying for some reason. You gather a bunch of these pieces around the kingdom and start asking people and animals if they have a matching pair that you can piece together. When you do get a match, something random could happen in any part of the kingdom, opening a secret doorway, spawning a dangerous ghoul and enemy, and maybe giving characters new ideas to progress through a side quest. This unfortunately makes the game a bit of a fetch quest, but it isn't very difficult to traverse across the game thanks to a multitude of ways that you can travel. Now, take this into perspective. Just imagine the numerous possibilities of being able to turn tiny in a game like Breath of the Wild. We've seen concept art for what appears to be the Minish, but I would like to think that would complicate the overall game's mechanics. But what if we saw Hyrule from a tiny perspective? Just imagine the world being 100 times larger than what we're used to. For a GBA game, the Minish Cap holds an impressive soundtrack designed in such a way that you wouldn't be put off so quickly after noticing how the music loops. They aren't very long loops, as a matter of fact, but it's the way that they are composed that are much better executed than other games, especially Phantom Hourglass. A common aspect in much of the soundtrack is that the game makes creative usage of the main Zelda theme by essentially taking bits from the song to create a whole new, different piece altogether. Mount Cranel's theme takes a bit of the iconic part of the Zelda theme, played in a minor key and putting a lot of percussion instruments to give off that personality of a volcanic mountain. Castor Wilds is a similar case, using the iconic part of the main theme and giving it a minor key as well, but this time with woodwind instruments to give a more ancient and mysterious vibe to the location. Cloudtops take a segment from Ocarina of Time's Hyrule Field theme and gives it a more magical feeling, as if you really are walking amongst the clouds and seeing Hyrule from a whole new perspective. I would also like to bring up the Picori theme, which really shows off how their society works. They live just like anyone else. They're humble, they're happy, but they're also tiny. Every miniature place you go feels magical, as if you've entered a completely different world. The unfortunate part is that the Minish Cap ended up being one of the most forgotten Zelda games ever, and people often never think about this whenever there are discussions about the sky, Skyloft, City in the Sky, Tears of the Kingdom. It presents lore that at first glance doesn't seem important at all, but it might as well end up being the most important thing in the franchise. Yet, this is also one of the rarest Zelda games out there. Being released on the same day as the Nintendo DS did not help its case, as people bought a DS for a DS, not a specific Zelda game that bears the same controversial art style. Being released half a year after an enormous reveal of another Zelda game also killed a lot of the craze that this game would have brought. More importantly, however, this game really wasn't released in a viable, legal way. Unless you wanted to spend hundreds of dollars getting the original Game Boy Advance version, with a Game Boy Advance or maybe a GameCube Game Boy Advance player, there's really no easy way to play this game. You'd have to use dubiously legal means. It was truly the final step to creating a definitive 2D Zelda game, and no other game has been ever able to top off this amazing experience that the game has to offer. Maybe you can argue that A Link Between Worlds is a better game, but I still have to get down to reviewing that, and besides, that is more of a modern take. The Minish Cap, on the other hand, is a timeless classic. The game has very high replay value for me, and it is undeniably one of the most unique Zelda games ever in the franchise, taking a dive into an area that we previously did not know about, while staying within familiar territory. The issues within this game are very minimal and lie simply within the fault of planning out an entire optional side quest that only benefits you if you don't want to use a guidebook. The game is very easy to pick up and play, with some of the best controls I've ever seen for a Zelda game. While the story is entirely linear, the range of side quests that you do is entirely up to the game and the luck that you have. But there is really no limit to how much more you can do. No Zelda game can be a masterpiece, but if I were to say which one is the closest, I believe the Minish Cap takes that cake. It's a timeless classic and a masterpiece. A game you can come back to at any given time whenever you feel like exploring something different for a change. I sincerely hope that if they ever do get down to remaking this game, it will be just as good, if not better, than the original. It deserves to be seen by everyone, and it will be an unforgettable experience, if you ask me. That is why The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap shrinks down to becoming our smallest S-tier game. I genuinely believe you will have a very fun and amazing time playing this game, and I think it has one of the biggest impacts on the franchise.